Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Computer Wednesday, we're gonna talk about risk associated with network attached storage. So let's dive right into it. Now, you have to understand this very thoroughly that our data creation rate has become exponential, and I am focusing a lot of videos on that because it's the primary lifeblood of our civilization, and we seriously don't take serious care of it. And for example, there are only two types of people: one who had data loss, and second number who's gonna have data loss. There is no third kind. So reality is it's serious. And at this point in time, even if you're talking about small business, let's say like a few programmers working in a small startup, they need an NAS. Photographers, if you're doing video photography or like paid client work, you need a NAS sooner or later. Wedding shooters, especially if you have a multi-person crew, even a small crew as in like 3 or 4 people, you need something like that. And data creation is super easy nowadays. Like heck, you can take a just a normal kids and just give them phones and they are creating data in gigabytes. So creating data is easy. However, data needs management. You need to know where you have it, because you genuinely do not want to be in a scenario which has happened where like small crew was working. They had basically they had videos file in their own system, and one of the person's laptop died and that footage was lost because the hard disk corrupted. So it happens. You do not want to do that, but you need to have a proper data management. NAS does allow to do that, and you can easily notice that NAS went from something very niche, very rare, only professional used it, to smaller and cheaper units, almost utility size, basically like toaster size kind of system started to crop up around the world, and prices start to drop because it's slowly going from a luxury device to a necessity for common average user. And especially if you are talking any level of small serious data business, you have to deal with this. So it is important. However, because of the fact that we pay boatload of money to get this sort of system, it does create a false illusion. The same illusion that people have suffered from, putting all their trust into a cloud service. They're like, yeah, we put everything in the cloud, that means we are safe. No, you still have to follow that 3-2-1. That must be followed. You do not want to be on the receiving end of a world where you have not followed it and then you suffer data loss because of your own stupidity. And I get it, like, because NAS units are, while they are coming down in price, they are still expensive. And not to mention, if you're talking about buying big hard drives, they are ludicrously expensive unless you are Linus Tech Tips. I'm like, that dude has like freaking hard SSD that are size of hard drives nowadays. But you get that point. Like for average Joe, it is ludicrously expensive, the hard drive. So because we spend so much money into it, we have a feeling that like our data is 100% safe, and it is safe. Like that's what it tells you. It's like you can have hard drive, you can have one hard drive failure, 2 hard drive failure, and you can still be safe in large 8 disk array. However, that's it. You still, other than that, there is no redundancy on NAS system, because you have to understand this very crucial fact. NAS is still one copy, and data rule of 3-1 simply means you must have bare minimum 3 copy. If you have only 1 copy, you dead. And people have suffered these consequences, because again, NAS is just a computer. It's, again, if you're done correctly, built with a good software stack, it should be a bit more resistant, a bit more robust. But again, at the end of the day, still one point of failure. And you can have other things failing. For example, non-HDD failure. Yes, hard drive is the most weak link in a computer. You can have a computer that works 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You can have that. Heck, I have like very old computers, like this giant old laptop from like Sony Vaio. Brand has disappeared, that's how old it is. But again, the component that has degraded the most is the hard drive. I have to buy like a new SSD in order to give it a new life. So you have to understand this very thoroughly. And like even older desktops is basically, that hard drive died long ago. So it is a fail point. It's a known fail point. That's why NAS became so popular, because it's like, okay, this is one of the weakest link. How do we reinforce that? Awesome. But here's the, there are other things also in your NAS system. For example, power supply, for example, RAM, motherboard, things of that nature. They could also fail, and it has happened a lot, especially with one specific batch of Synology network attached storage, because they had issue with the power supply manufacturer who was providing them the equipment that was defective. They literally had systems where like every 6 months, like your model was crapping out. It had an issue. Like I have provided video on below. A lot of people suffered serious amount of data loss because they thought NAS means data safety. And yes, their hard drive was perfectly fine. Sometimes they were lucky enough, they removed the did a basically Frankenstein surgery, applying basically PC power supply into that system and try to recover the data. It did work, but here's the deal: how many people can do that, and how many people have the knowledge and spare power supply where it's just like, I'm gonna do this. So that's one of those things you have to understand. HDD is just one point of failure. Other than that, you still have system that can still fail, and then the worst case scenario happens. This is a very common thing with old NAS. Basically, especially if the hard disks that are constantly spinning, they are reaching their 3 or 4 year kind of period. Now they are getting into the red zone of cascade failure. Cascade failure is very serious simply because, think of this way, let's say you have 8 drive and you have a scenario, or not 8 drive, let's say 4, and you have like one parity disk, meaning if any of the disk dies, you are safe. But here's that does okay, you pull it out, you are about to put a new one in, but because while you are putting the new one in, the whole RAID would be what we call rebuilt, meaning it will try to fill it up again with parity data, so it is safe again. But in doing so, it will put boatload of strain on whole hard disk, a lot of strain, and that consequence of recreating that system could literally cause a second drive failure while you are rebuilding the array, meaning you will go from one hard disk failure to flat out data loss, because during the reconstruction time you could have a cascade failure. It has happened. It's a very known threat. For example, any enterprise that takes data very seriously, they will never let a hard disk, again, they have a data metric to know, like, because they are buying hundreds of hard drives, they know for a fact that, like, after 50 years it's way too risky to run this. They will like, yeah, we're just gonna swap it out. And you will find that, like, very healthy working drives are, like, always flooded in the second-hand market from the enterprise. It's like, why? They never let whole server to reach a point of cascade failure. You have old hard disks, like, again, very high quality, top of the line hard disks, but they still have a expected lifespan. And if you are reaching a point where, like, your drives have been on, their read write speed is not as accurate, their false read and write speed is too high, meaning, again, it does try to, it's a magnetic head, it's trying its best to read it, it does have error, and as it gets older, the platter becomes weaker, the read write error goes up, so it slows down drastically. You could have a scenario where it's like one hard disk fail, I put another one, poof, whole array died. More than enough people have suffered this. Then we have ransomware, and this, I'm like genuinely surprised. Like, ransomware people are no longer even targeting, like, big corporation. They're just like flooding it. It's like, just go see whoever you target. So, like, it has happened. Like, even Synology systems and QNAP systems and Western Digital systems, they are like just getting flooded with these things. It's like they're just YOLO. Your data went YOLO. And OS failure, because, again, at the end of the day, it's a software. You could still have blue screen of death. Again, even if it's a 1.2 system, or even if it's a Linux system, it's still a software stack. You could still have issues. So it is one of those things that you have to understand. Yes, it does hurt to buy. Yes, it does cost boatload of money, but you still have to follow 3 to 1. Do not ever be in a scenario where it's like, all my data is in this one spot. If it goes poof, I go poof. That should never happen, especially if you're talking about small business, because it is true, it is known. If you look around it and you want to find companies have gone bankrupt. A small upcoming startup have gone bankrupt because they did not take data seriously. Photographers have lost client, and they're like, literally their career started to go downhill because, again, they had issue where they lost a footage or card failure. And you will notice that that's the reason why every quote-unquote pro-end camera equipment has dual card slots. It's a necessary requirement. It's one of those things that people have learned the hard way, and I do not want you to be in that hard way learning content, because there are only 2 people who lost their data, who are about to lose their data. If you are in that about to lose data, it's much better to have backup on top of backup with some more backup. At bare minimum 3 backups, 2 medium. Now the medium part is very difficult to do, but I'll explain why it has to be done, and 1 offsite, because fire is a thing in this world, earthquake is a thing in this world, meaning if you have all the data in one location, poof. So it is one thing you have to understand. This whole video is just made for that, because I have already covered NAS, but, like, this is one thing that I'm noticing in my comment section again and again, is that people are like, oh, cloud means I don't have to worry about. No, it's still vulnerable. NAS, I don't have to worry about. Still vulnerable, because you must follow that 3 to 1 at bare minimum. Be mindful that 3 to 1 is bare minimum. It's not the best, it's bare minimum. So let's understand the pre-built market. Now, pre-built market has exploded recently. You can buy Western Digital, QNAP, Synology. It has exploded a lot, and the 2 primary reasons for that is, A, it's small, so it's not big and bulky and, like, takes up a lot of room, and it's also energy efficient. So it's also kind of like, okay, I can run it in the background for 3 or 5 years. It won't have, like, huge energy bill because of that. So that's also awesome. And you just have to buy them, put the drives. Again, depending on your budget, you can put the drives, and they generally come from 2 to 8 disk capacities. They are very good in terms of UI, because the early units were they were really not that good, but over time they became very good, and they are beginner friendly. However, that being said, because India is not such a big market for NAS right now, most of these companies don't have direct a branch here, so they import indirectly, so the cost is ludicrously high. So price to performance ratio is horrible in India. I mean, so, like, it's even in abroad it's horrible, but here it's like extra horrible. It's like, why it's like so ludicrously expensive. And I'm talking during chip shortages, meaning I can build a better system during chip shortages. That's how bad it is. So that creates an issue, because these things are generally what we call just start it out with. Like if many photographers who need this sort of system, and again they do not want to spend time and resource into like managing this sort of system, they're like, yeah, just I'm gonna buy this and done. Awesome, materials deal. Try to buy 2 of them and make sure one is in a different location. Or like how corporation does that is like they will have a relay switching them, meaning one will be on but another one must be off during that time. The reason for that is like if you have a ransomware attack, it only poofs your one system, your second system still would be safe. So you will have that on off on off on off, making sure that data is at, now again it will have side effect of being one day out of sync, but it does have the benefit of higher redundancy, and it's very cheap. Like it's just implementation wise is quite cheap, but in terms of use wise you can't do much of them, because you may think, hey, people are building what we call ad scrubbers as a server. They're like basically your data comes from your router, goes to the server, comes out, goes to your whole network, and now you no longer have to see ads on your any browser, any system that is utilizing your main gateway to the internet. It's getting filtered through this server. Again, these systems do not have enough spare processing power to them where it can do that. Even some modern ones, they are like so limited, like in terms of like you need 8 horsepower, I'm gonna give you 8.5 horsepower, not more than that. But when you are building a PC, again, because you are building from a general purpose equipment done designed for the maximum performance you can get for the money, you have more than enough spare. Heck, you can even overbuild it. You can like, or if you are retiring your old gaming PC, you still have more than enough chances that it is already overpowered, where you can do a lot of secondary tasks, because again you are paying for the electrical bill. What if you get some extra work out of it? You can do that. So pre-builds are a very good option if you really do not want to do the extra labor, but they do come with serious consequences. That consequences being they're in terms of limited use and performance, and it does start to pile up, because again many times people when they are starting out this, they're like, I'm never gonna need more than this. Trust me, we all say that, and sooner or later we all are like, yeah, we need more than this. So then we come the amazing option of DIY. Now it is big. Again, my NAS is big. So again, while it is big, it does not have too many hard drives. I only have 2 hard drives in this. So again, it's this computer is like from 2009, so it does not even like, it has only 2 SATA ports. So I had to physically buy a PCI 1X SATA card just so I can put 2 extra hard drives into it, and it had a network attached of 10 Mbps. I needed to buy a PCI card, not PCI Express, PCI card of getting this 1000 Mbps, so meaning 100 Mbps proper connection. So now I can transfer some big files from in and out at least 60-70 Mbps reliably. So you have to understand this aspect. It is big, it is inefficient, but it's built for your need. For example, my case, my need was I needed something that I can connect through network. So meaning I can use my TV, computer, laptop, whatever have you, and it's over the network. That's the first requirement. It cannot be just like a USB hard disk. It had to be over network. That was achieved, and I was reusing my old hardware. And I have a lot of performance. Even in this, even a computer that is this old, I still have performance, because again, it was a kind of good system back in the day. Again, I do not expect this to basically, if I'm gonna rip my 4K Ultra HD discs and I'm gonna transport it, it's gonna be like, bro, what the hell you're doing? So there are some limits to that, but even in those sort of scenarios, I can do surprisingly lot. And if I'm becoming more competent with Docker containers and all that, just I can go YOLO on it. So that's the whole thing. And if you are talking about a startup who are like trying to learn things and build things, it's a really good investment. You can buy cases that are specifically built for that. It's kind of amazing. Some people have also 3D printed it. It's kind of amazing. This whole world of DIY network attached storage, you can do amazing things. And it's one of those things that if you have an IT person and really knows that person, understands the things, or just IT person for the sake of it. Oh, I have a lot of degrees, but I'm not really competent. So how do you become competent? You actually start building it. That's the best way to become that. So you can have a lot of performance, multi-use and multi-user. That's another benefit, because you can, even right now, even in chip shortage, you can just buy a basic motherboard. They're like, hey, basic motherboard only has 4 SATA ports nowadays. Okay, no problem. You buy that. Just make sure your basically motherboard has more than enough PCI Express lanes. You have like a ports, more than enough ports. You're like, okay, I'm going to start with 4. Then you have saved up money. You have more hard drives capacity. Put another card in. Put 8 more hard disk on. Put another PCI Express card. Get a 10 Gbps connection if you need it. Like if your network stack became important, much more healthy, you can go there. So that's the whole point. Lot of users support. You can go YOLO on it. And old PC, again, this is my second thing that I want to do. This is like a second old PC that I want to have something. I will figure something out with this. And in terms of operating system, nowadays you can do almost anything with it. You can start with Windows. Now again, I know a lot of people, oh, Windows, no, Windows is amazing, flat out the best. Because again, the reason why I'm calling it the best, not as in like, oh, it has no issues. The best I need, like, it does everything, almost everything. Heck, there are freaking satellite softwares. Like, I have directly downloaded images, weather satellite images from basically NASA satellites of NOAA satellites and Russian satellite from Meteor satellite. I've done all of them. All of the apps were available for basically Windows. Again, most of them should work in Linux, but like, good luck with command line. So that's the whole point. Windows is really amazing, and they are stable also. It's not like, oh, Windows equals blue screen of death. Like, again, what hardware you are using? Like, I have worked in 3D gaming industry, and all of the computers were Windows. I have people who have worked in, like, big Disney movies as a VFX artist. All their systems were Windows. Windows does work. Again, it's not the best or the greatest, but it does work. And if you do not want to have like extra hoo-ha, extra hassle, you can go with that. If you're like, hey, I do not want to go to command line, I understand that. And after using Ubuntu, I'm like, yep. And Linux has this issue where everybody thinks they know Linux. Well, nobody knows anything about Linux, because the first time you will ask any question, they're like, oh, you should already know this, or that's why I use, if I issue with Ubuntu, people are like, oh, that's why I use Mint. You have issue with Mint, or that's why I use Arch. If you have issue with Arch, you're like, that's why I use Manjaro or whatever have you, or Pop OS. So that's the issue. So people do hate Linux for this exact reason. So if you are happy with Windows, go with Windows. Go YOLO on it. Don't worry about it. Like, it's your equipment. Whatever you want to do, go YOLO on it. You can use Ubuntu server if you want to. If you want to really go to pro level, you can go into True NAS. Again, available for free. So you can do whatever the heck you want to do. It's all up to you. And this is one of those things that I will seriously encourage people to do it, simply because knowledge is priceless. It is one of those things that if you know it, you may not feel more, oh, I feel bigger, I may feel stronger. It's not like going to a gym, but it is gym for your mind. The more you know, the less susceptible to bad things you are. Meaning, if you truly understand how important data is, you will never be in a scenario where like, oh, I need to send data for recovery. You will never be in there. You'll be like, dude, just replace this hard disk. You will never worry about data, because you would have known, hey, data is important, so I'll have multiple copies. One hard disk bites the dust, no problem. Just replace the hard disk and get basically reclone the data. Awesome. So this is one of those things. And the more you build, the more you learn. For example, this recent thing, this laptop is very old, I think around 2009 or even older than that. Now this display is poof, it does not work. Now I tried to use basically USB boot on this, and it did work. I was seeing display on my external VGA port. Everything was working, but here's the deal. I was never getting any menu in Mint. Like I wanted to use Mint. Everything was working, but like I was getting mouse, but then I realized it was still thinking that primary monitor is still active. So I had to go to command line and then type change the primary output to VGA1. So again, this sort of thing you will only know once you try with this, and that's the amazing part of it. Like trying to utilize old hardware. If something bad happens to this, again, my dad was trying to throw this away. I'm like, let me experiment with this, like this e-waste. Let me experiment with this. Same goes for this. This is like very old, very old, like very old. Dell Inspiron 535S. It's like it has Core 2 Duo. It literally has Core 2 Duo. It does not even have i3, early i3. It has a Core 2 Duo. And I told you, like does not even have full gigabit network. I had to add that. But again, the more I did, the more I learned. The more I learned, more confident I became. It's like, hey, I can deal with this. Again, it is painful. It is idiotic, but I can deal with it. So this is one of those things. The more you build, the more you learn. And DIY allows you to control everything. Like this case is available nowadays. And surprisingly affordable prices. You have 8 hard drive bays, which are super expensive if you try to buy 8 hard drives NAS unit anywhere in India. And it also has the 2.5-inch system, because again, I have recently realized that optical media is seriously useful, especially if you want to back up documents and photos. Again, videos, they are really shortcoming, but like I have invested a lot into MDisk setup, where I'm using MDisk to back up all my data. Again, I have that also. That's the whole thing. I can fine tune it and tailor make it exactly how I need. I can have that. So I will figure out software stack, hardware, easy to fix, meaning if you have a power supply failure, you just yoink it out. You don't have to worry about it. You have a RAM failure, or RAM is dislodged, things happen. You reseat it, you replace the RAM. You're like, okay, if the motherboard bites the dust, you replace it. If the host bus adapter bites the dust, you change it. Like you can deal with a lot of things, and every problem will teach you something new. And unless something extreme happens, which could happen, you have something extreme. The worst case scenario, especially if you're dealing with RAID cards, is like that card gets corrupted and it starts to write corrupted data in your hard disk, then your hard disks are poofed. So that has happened, but generally it should never happen in a first party brand system. But it does happen sometimes. It's one of those things. That's how we know like a RAID is still vulnerable. That's why people are like, you have a server and you have a backup server of that backup server. There is a reason for that. So unless something extreme like that happens, your data is safe. And you still have to follow that 3-2-1 rule. And that is why like this LTO tapes are like, ubiquitous. LTO 7 tape right now is kind of cheaply available in the market. It's 6 terabyte capacity. They're like, isn't this awesome? Well, the tapes are awesome. The drive cost is like 3 to 4 lakhs rupees, meaning almost a price of a cheap car. It makes iPhone look cheap. Let that sink in. The driver cost, the tape is super, affordable. You're talking about like, driver cost could be $5,000 to $10,000. So that's the issue. If you can find that like from a server industry, then you are GG. But like, good luck with that. Again, if they are changing it, it may be because it's getting outdated by LTO 8, LTO 9, LTO 10, or it may be because it was broken. If you are in the unlucky one, you buy a second-hand broken one, you poofed. But if it's just they are upgrading, you may still find equipment that has a lot of life left into it. That's a good system, and this is literally the equipment used to back up almost every data critical system. And because it's disconnected, it's offline, it's never susceptible to ransomware if done correctly. So this is one of those things that the more you do it, the more you will learn, the more you will grow, and the less likelihood you will be in a position where like somebody can exploit you. Like, oh, they are giving you a basic service and you're like, we're going to charge $500 per hour because you are so stupid. Like, I can't blame them if you're stupid enough, but you get that point. Just do it and start with old hardwares where you do not have to worry about it. It's like, oh, I poofed it. That's how you start. That's how you begin. And then you'll own it. But again, if you are talking about like small business or startup, in those scenarios, I will say start to build a proper equipment. Don't try to use second-hand equipment. Never ever use second-hand hard drives. So this was my video on network attached storage and its a risk. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike. I would also urge you to leave a comment because I do try my best to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.